Okay, hello. Today I want to spend a few minutes, I've got 10 minutes before my next meeting, sharing some experience that I've gained over the past couple of years running a test ThingWorx environment. And one of the things that has plagued me is various log files building up and taking a lot of space and essentially bringing my virtual machine to a halt for various reasons. I want to have a look at this. So 15 gigabytes of logs, is this really possible? Sounds a little bit crazy, but it's possible. First thing that I've come across in the past is journal control. Journal control is used by system services and other things in Linux, and by default, it has a number of configurations which will allow it to essentially auto manage this for you. But basically, the history that is going to keep is going to be dependent of the space that you have free. So it is possible that as journal control is doing its cleaning, if you have a large log growth elsewhere or something else that quickly takes up space on your machine, the journal control is still using many gigabytes of logs, not because it's not taking care of things, but just because something else has changed quite quickly. Second thing is Tomcat access logs. Access logs, in the case that we're going to look at today, in the Tomcat installation that comes with ThingWorx, the access logs don't necessarily have a short enough retention period, so it depends on what you want to do, but we'll have a look at multiple months of a busy system, and that can equate to many gigabytes of access logs. And ThingWorx log archives is something else that I have had where I have done some significant testing on the platform, and you're looking really at the log files typically, but we have to keep also in mind that the log archives, we're going to keep those logs as they're rotated out for a period of time, and those log archives can be quite large as well. And finally, my surprise of maybe last week has been Catalina out, where I've seen log growth of Catalina out to 4.5 gigabytes, and it turns out that Tomcat doesn't really rotate this file as it's supposed to. So I had to put some outside mechanism in place in order to address that, but we certainly don't need 6 months or 12 months worth of logs for Catalina out to be kept. So let's dive in and have a look, and starting with ThingWorx. Um, if I can find it. Normally it was over here, but I guess it's not. Ah, there it is. It was just hiding behind the other window. Okay, so ThingWorx, the first thing in logging in ThingWorx, if we come into ThingWorx, I mentioned the archives, and we're going to come into the subsystem configuration, subsystems configuration, logging subsystem, and there's a couple of things here that I just want to mention. We can see it's enabled, it's auto start logging subsystem. This is what's going to handle the logging. Maximum file size, this is for the specific size of the logs for the rotation. Number of days to keep in the archive. This 7 days, I believe, is a default. This can obviously be extended or shortened depending on what really you're going for as far as how long you want to keep the logs, how busy your system is, and how big the log files are. Total size of in gigabytes of all log files to retain. This is obviously a handy thing, but it depends really on what you're basing your principles on. I don't have a disk where my ThingWorx storage is on 8 gigabytes. So if this is 7 gigabytes, this is pretty much most of the disk. And this enable stack tracing is important for determining when you have something go wrong, what the call stack looks like for that particular issue. But it also means that the log files are going to be significantly large in comparison to what they would be if you just had one log entry for each event. So very important for debugging and tracing, but also going to make those logs be much larger. Same goes for script stack tracing. We'll see some of the script logs that I have and how quite large they are, and I do not have stack tracing on, so you can imagine that depending on what you're doing, that could also grow those logs very large. So log retention settings, this is going to pop those guys into a folder. Let's go have a look at that real quickly. So we've got our ThingWorx storage logs. and for some reason my logs folder is not protected, but my archives is. So here we can see I've got those logs, the classic log files. They all look to be in relative good order. When I go into the archives folder, this is where those 7 days of archives are kind of being kept and rotated. And we can see here that I have a large number of them, and a large number of them that have rotated. You can see here there's 24 iterations of the script error log because it grew to a particular size and then was rotated. So here in the archives, because we're keeping X number of days, we're also keeping all of those iterations to a certain point here. It's between iteration 10 and iteration 53 of the script log, and each one of these is 100 megabytes. So that can be great, obviously, depending on what you're doing. But what you're seeing here are some logs that I pulled back from some load testing that we did. And so just for one day, we have, we have more than a gigabyte of script logs. So really depends on what we're doing, but it's just kind of a good reminder that those archives are on disk, uncompressed. So not really doing this in the order that I anticipated, but didn't really think about it too much, frankly. Let's go have a look at something that we can do about that. So if we come into here into the ThingWorx Help Center, we can find this help section about configuring logging. And this is somewhat of a bit of a strange, perhaps, fashion to do this, but it says, look, go look for the defaults for logback configuration, which are packaged in the WAR file. They come with ThingWorx. So when ThingWorx is deployed, it's going to pull this internal logback XML, and it's going to use that to put into the running application unless there is one specified in here. So probably not going to go through the process of showing you how to unzip this from here, but it's explained where to go get this jar file, extract it, pull out the internal logback, pop it into your ThingWorx platform logback XML folder, and then we can go in and we can make some modifications. Here specifically, they're referring to changing the debug level. We're not going to do that though. We're going to look at something else, which is something pretty cool that actually is built into the logback framework. Logback, you know what? Yeah, it is there. Okay, right on. So so this is this quite lengthy file. What does it say? 511 lines. I want to see the parts that refer to the log file rotation. You know what I'm going to search for? Rolling. Yeah, so we come down to here this section about the rolling file appenders, and the rolling file appenders are going to be used for doing the log rotation. And here we can see that I've got this log path set, application log.log is the file, and then this is saying rolling policy class. When we hit the configurations that we just saw, this is how we're going to roll these things over, and this is the file name to use in two various you can see here, this is the source, then pop it into the archive folder here. So I'm not going to do each one of these, but I will do one of them for the sake of this example. If I were to happen to just change this to zip, you'd figure it's got to be more complicated than this, and it's totally not. Logback takes this into consideration, so it's going to see that it needs to roll the file over into this new file, and that because I've specified zip, it's going to actually compress it for me. So now with a ThingWorx restart, right. So with the ThingWorx restart, I obviously have to go through and I have to change these for each of the logs. But with the ThingWorx restart, now when it goes through those nightly rotations, it's actually going to zip the logs before it puts them into the archive, and that's going to take my my files down significantly. And you know what? We can even go have a look quickly. What that's going to look like. I've just got to open up another session here to the actual running system, and Right. Trying to go too quickly here. So check this out. It zipped everything up, and you can see the actual configuration I used was .log.zip. But here I've got 14 megs, 2 megs, 5 megs. So it's really giving us kind of the best of both worlds. It's keeping those on hand for us in case we need to go back and get them, but it's not taking up like gigabytes and gigabytes. One other thing to mention while we're just kind of looking at this, actually on the wrong system here, is if we have a look at the free disk space on the different volumes that I have, SDA1, my basic my boot volume that houses ThingWorx, 16 gigabytes, 12 gigabytes are used, 3.8 free, and I have this other volume here that is mapped to ThingWorx storage. So I had initially set that up because of the log files growing so large, and so I wanted to put everything ThingWorx related about those logs over there onto a different volume. Definitely has helped, and you can see I've got 6.2 gigabytes pretty much of log files on there right now. But it hasn't helped with some of those other things because journal control, Catalina, Tomcat access logs, they're all still stored over here. So let's go have a quick look at one of those other things that I'm going to kind of pick from random. If we come into, I guess right here, and we have a look at here, we got a ton of access logs. I really don't need that many. So in order to change that, I can probably have a look at the conf, I believe it's in web, probably, XML. And I think it's called like an access valve. I'm going to search for valve. I'll go to the bottom of the file. I'm pretty sure it's near the bottom. You know what? I'm going to search for access log. Or localhost. You know what? I'm in the wrong place. This is in the server. It's not in the web. This is why I can't find it. Valve. There it is. So here we have this access log processing valve class name down here, and we can see that there's this text suffix localhost access log, and I've got a couple of additional parameters in here for logging some things like service execution time and bytes that are going to be returned, which is helpful. And I swore it was in here. Doesn't appear to be in here. It's somewhere else. I'm not going to find it exactly. You can do a web search for access, Tomcat access log configuration, but basically, you know where I think it might be in logging properties, conf ls logging properties right here, logging properties. So here in logging properties, we've got, check this out, max days right here, 90 days. So it's going to keep all these logs in here for 90 days. 3 months, that's quite handy, but it might be too much for us. So Tomcat logging properties in the conf folder, come on in here and put those to something that's more realistic for what you're looking for. And what was next? ThingWorx logs, Catalina out, journal control. Journal control, I mentioned journal control. It's going to, journal control, to remember where the configuration for that is. It's going to automatically take care of a bunch of things, but we can see on a running system to check what the journal control size is, size used. Managing journal control max log size limits, check size. Disk usage right here. Look, journal control disk usage. You can check this with something along those lines, and there we go. I've already, this is something I put in place more than a year and a half ago, so it's already tuned. But you can see how much journal control might be using, and you can quickly vacuum space up there if you need to. And you should go into the configurations for journal control to make sure that they're appropriate for how your system is running. And Catalina out, access logs, we talked about that. So Catalina out, this is kind of a funny one that hit me the other day, and I was scratching my head. I did go into the logging properties in there, and we saw in the logging properties, if we go back into the conf, that there's some BI logging properties here, Catalina, that it's got 90 days fine log level. So here we can do some settings, but basically what I saw was I had a 4.5 gigabyte Catalina out file that went back more than 9 months. So I don't think this was really taking things into consideration. And I really don't need to keep Catalina for that long. So you can come in here and change this to make it smaller. I didn't see that working, but it could also have been that I had a lot of errors. Stack traces take up a lot of space in Catalina out, and so I wanted to do some compression on that, and for that I leveraged log rotate. So if we have a look at log rotate, first of all, let's have a look at the log file for my Catalina. I've actually truncated that 4.5 gigabyte file down already to 1 gigabyte. So Catalina, you can see the Catalina file is 1 gigabyte exactly, and from there, if we have a look at log rotate, I think it's log rotate, and then here I created a Tomcat file. So log rotate, right, yeah, this is an old backup I was trying to use to show you some of the pre-modifications. So here we have a look over here on the system here, log rotate d Tomcat. There we go. So here I've just created this log rotate Tomcat file, and you can see I'm pointing specifically to this file, right, Catalina out, and I said copy truncate. This is going to copy the file to roll it over, and then truncate the existing file, so that Tomcat, while it's running, is essentially just going to continue working with the same open file handlers. Do this daily, rotate and keep 7 days, compress the file while you're doing it. If the file is not there, it's not a big deal. Size 50 megabytes, and let's just have a look at some of the results of all those efforts, because I think I'm already late for my meeting. Right. So which system are we on here? Logs, archives. So there we've got our zips, and we want to go into Catalina home logs, and here you can see my Catalina. It's taken that 1 gigabyte zip Catalina out. It's rotated it over. This was yesterday, down to about 10 megs. So huge compression. I did still keep it, and this was going to happen daily. So this is going to get everything down. And if we have a quick look at disk free on across the various drives here, I've shaved off about 6 gigabytes here on my primary volume, and my secondary volume, the ThingWorx storage. You know, we've gone down to 564 from about 6 gigabytes. So pretty important when we don't think about things when things are running so well. For me, it's mostly load testing. When I put this thing under pressure, whether it be an error message or whatever, just script logs, things that come up in there, it causes everything to be multiplied by hundreds of thousands or millions of iterations, causing the logs to grow. But I have certainly seen that also running a system over many, many years without getting your log files in check is going to have an impact here.